training. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have to the left of me here once again, retired police chief Randy Dixon. Chief, hello again.
Hello.
I wanted to get you on specifically for this because I know you've got a lifelong, about 45 plus years experience as law enforcement.
45.
And I wanted to talk about situations on a 911 call or whatever. I had somebody talking to me about a situation that happened to them. They were at their home and they felt extremely threatened. Whether it was verbal or with a weapon, it doesn't matter. They felt it was necessary to acquire their handgun, hold their ground on their property, call 911, and law enforcement comes on the scene, and it ends up seeming to him he felt very aggressed upon by law enforcement, and then this person who the law enforcement knows has a record and is a hassle seems to not have any type of trouble with the law whatsoever. And I was wondering if we could talk about scenarios like that. What's going on? Why does that happen? What can we do to fix it?
Yeah, basically, from that scenario there, what it sounds like to me that and I don't know who the officer was, didn't care who the officer was, but it sounds like to me that his training did not leave him with enough information that he knew how to approach a situation like that. You know, it's like we have to look at it just like a game warden would look at it. Everybody a game warden deals with almost invariably is going to have a weapon. When you're trying to protect your own property, you know, the Constitution allows you to have a gun at your house, allows you to have protection. So an officer to go and to hassle somebody because they had a weapon to protect themselves, to me, that's a lack of training on that officer's part. Now, not knowing the totality of all the circumstances and not wanting to be an armchair quarterback, one of the things I will tell you is this. You know, when an officer goes out to a house and he tries to determine what's happened, a lot of times that officer is going in blind. Most of the time he's going in blind. So he's got to get the sides of the story. Now, with that scenario that you just gave, the other gentleman had a record, especially if it's a record dealing with what they're there for, then the officer should kind of, you know, he needs to hear both sides of the story. But before he hears both sides of the story, he needs to check himself at the door to make sure that he doesn't sound accusatory toward one person or another person. You know, an officer who goes on a 911 call such as that and who walks up and the guy's got on his property and he's got a weapon to protect himself, the officer has no right in my mind to say anything about the guy with the weapon. That's his property. That's his defense mechanism.
Would there be one instance of hesitation because when they come up to the scene, they may not know that that person with the gun is the true owner of the property?
Absolutely, and that is another thing, and I was going to allude to that. You know, when an officer gets there, he doesn't know 99% of what went on. He gets basically the location, the name of the call, what type of call it is, and then he's going in not knowing anything else. It's his job to determine exactly what's going on. Now, what I would have done, and most officers would have done, I think, was number one, we would have secured that weapon if we could. Either tell him to put it away or let me hold it till we figure out what's going on, then give it back to the person or tell him that, you know, he had a right to have that weapon. But when he sees an officer coming up, an officer is not going to know who the bad guy and the good guy is many times. So to put that gun away or holster it when the officer gets there.
Yeah, that was a comment made by this individual in the story that he was concerned for his life as law enforcement was there, and it seemed that they were more impressed or occupied with him, and he was getting confused because why are you focused on me when that's the bad person, and they were concerned with securing the firearm.
Right.
So I can understand that position clearly.
But you know, one of the things that I will repeat this over and over again. Many times it's a lack of training on the police officer's part. You know, and I'm not saying that this officer didn't have training. It may be his training was not specifically for that one area. But the number one thing is you got to protect yourself as an officer. That's true. But you also need to have all the details going in. You know, ask them to identify who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. And that goes back to also training the citizens to give enough information when they call in 911.
It seems to me that there can be a lot of room for error, but in the scenarios that we keep coming up with when it involves law enforcement, criminal, something, it's just no way in how can you do it there on the spot. I get this impression no matter what, unless it's literally life or death, or some type of severe thing that can happen to you or family or property, that you just submit whether it's right or wrong and figure it out later.
That's exactly what you have to do. I mean, the old saying is, we don't hold court on the side of the road. Well, the same is true for a homeowner. When you go into a home and you try to go into that house, you're not sure what the situation is going to be. Get the particulars, make sure the weapons are secured, whether it's the bad guy or the good guy, and then try to determine who and what and when and where and how come something happened. That's the bottom line. We've got to know things ahead of time. We can't just jump, as law enforcement, we can't jump to conclusions, because if we do that, then our conclusions become an assumption. And you know what they say about when you assume something.
Yeah, you can spell it out.
Yep.
Okay, Chief, I noticed you got a lot of notes here on this particular topic. Why don't you, if you want to go a certain direction with it, inform us on some other things, because I always have a tendency to ask questions when I hear something. I gave the initial comment. Let's see what you got.
Well, one of the things is what I want to encourage people to do, especially when they're the complainants. Number one, you do have a right to ask questions. Ask them what's going to happen, how come you're there. Secondly, if the officer's spoken to you in any kind of ill way, or if he was very abusive to you verbally as a complainant, you have a right to complain to his superiors. And many times, and I know that I have seen it in the past, there's officers that don't deal well with the public. Well, if they don't deal well with the public, then they don't need to be in law enforcement, bottom line. Because our public is who we serve. The old saying, and boy, I hate to hear this, I pay your salary. Well, they do. We just don't like to hear that. I mean, unfortunately, I had a guy tell me that one night, especially after I just got through arrested him.
Yeah, but I can't deal with the lack of respect for the
No,
badge.
you can't. I mean, that's just it. And that was one of the things that, when I was growing up, the police officers were revered, they were respected. That has changed over the years, and sometimes rightfully so, depending on what the officer's attitude is. But, the badge and the institution has to be revered. There's a fine line between law enforcement, between safety and chaos and anarchy. That officer is there to try to keep that line going, make sure that one's on one side, one's on the other. But an officer cannot be abusive to the citizens. He cannot use his badge as a heavy weight on his chest to be a John Wayne. He's got to do things that are logistically correct. He's got to do things that are politically correct, unfortunately, nowadays. And number one, we try to get the respect of law enforcement, of the citizens toward law enforcement. There's a survey that came out, and in that survey, it was talking about what happens when a police officer is rude or disrespectful to the general public. Well, when that officer is rude to someone, then there's a 50% chance that person will never, ever have respect for other law enforcement officers based on one bad experience.
That's the way it works. Bad apple spoils the best.
Exactly. So, my idea is this. If you as a citizen or you as a complainant, if you're treated badly or irreverently by a police officer, he's got a superior. You need to report him to that superior. I never had a problem with someone coming down and talking to me about something my officers did when I was chief. Sometimes I found that it wasn't necessarily what's going on that they said, but you also got to remember now, and one of the things I hope that people come away with is this. Every police department in the state of Texas now, to my knowledge, has body cams, especially the smaller departments. If you have a question, that officer should be recording what's going on. He should have a video of it. If he doesn't, and they're equipped with it, shame on that officer is all I got to say.
Chief, there was, when it comes to verbal judo and all that kind of stuff, there's part of it that says, I win by losing. If I lose, I actually win. And what that means is, if me personally have an objective, and that objective is to have a successful outcome, I look at all the different avenues, and I say one avenue is direct head-on contact. Well, that's not going to work. Another one is diffusion. That's not going to work. Submission is going to work because it's going to get me to my end result, which is successful accomplishment of whatever that mission might be. And to clarify that up, to make it more clear, sometimes if you just shut up and listen and do what you're told, you'll end up getting the result that you want. Not always. And with that, I wanted to ask you, Chief, is there some type of checklist that we could put in our mental capacities that says if we ever got into a situation like this is what we should do no matter what it is, whether the officer is a good one or an officer is a challenged one, what are the steps we should do to accomplish the mission, and that is to get the bad person taken away or to get our concerns heard and moved upon or whatever?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you got to remember the officer is going into an unknown volatile situation in most cases. He's not going to know what's going on. Number one, as a citizen, keep your hands where they can be seen.
Absolutely.
Keep your hands out of your pockets. Keep your hands free. Don't have them on your hips. Have your hands free. Secondly, listen to what the officer tells you to do. He may be telling you to do something that you don't like, but if he is, that could be addressed later. When tempers, when tension, when stress is on scene, then there's a lot of things that could happen. You know as well as I do, you've probably said some things you wish you could take back. Well, out on the scene, when you say things that are pouring gasoline on a fire, then that's going to end up making the situation much worse for you. You can always fix it at a later date, but that scene is not the place. And it's kind of like what we tell people. You know, police officers have to make a split-second decision to do something, and then courts can determine for months and months and months whether that officer did something right or wrong. Well, to keep you from being a victim of whatever that officer is doing, just pay attention to what he's telling you to do. You may not like it, you may not want to do it, but do what he tells you to do, and then at a later date, after everything is de-escalated, then you can control and you can talk about it. You can complain on whoever it is that needs to be complained upon, and that officer should then then the supervisor should investigate what's going on.
Chief, let me ask a simple scenario, and that would be, you felt threatened, somebody's trespassing on your property, they're on the porch, they're spooking you, you got your gun with you, you just want them to get out of here, you want the police to come make a record of it, you call 911, what should you expect? What things should you have on your mental checklist that law enforcement should accomplish at that time?
If that person has already gone, put your gun up. If he's still there, have your gun holstered when the officer drives up. Tell the officer, I am armed, this is my home, and I used my gun only, I was only going to use it if I had to defend myself.
That's Penal Code 904.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And so, you know, basically is make that officer feel like he's not in the middle of a crossfire, or he is not in the middle of a situation that's going to escalate instead of de-escalate.
Okay, it can go quick one way or the other. It just depends on how the tempers are. That's why the more prepared you are, the more knowledgeable you are, the more confident you are, and the more understanding, the easier it's going to be for everybody to get out of a situation like that. That's why it's so important.
It is. And, you know, that officer, and I'm not making excuses for police officers. Anybody that knows me, I taught ethics in police academies and in police training. I taught how to handle stress situations. Everybody knows that a police officer, is a human being who just wears a gun and a badge. That's all he is. He's going to have the same reactions, the same feelings as other people. He should be trained better. And sometimes that training doesn't get where it should be, or he forgets that training. And then you have a situation where two hot-headed people are working against each other. Somebody's got to be calm.
Let me give you an example. If I was an officer and I was going to do a traffic stop, let's say, I know there are certain things that would concern me. Where the stop is being done, the type of way that the individual stopped the vehicle, what they're doing inside of the vehicle, is it daylight or nighttime? So what I do to, I guess, explain what I'm trying to get at with these questions, when I get pulled over by an officer, which is not very often, by the way, I don't care if it's day or night, I roll down all the windows, I turn on the dome lights, I shut the engine off, the keys are on the dash, my hands are resting across the steering wheel, I don't move. He sees my hands, I don't move in an aggressive manner, and when the officer comes over, I say, hello, officer. Officer, I want you to know I am licensed to carry. I do have the weapon on me at this time. It's in the center console or wherever it may be, and my wallet is in my left rear pocket. What would you like me to do, sir? I diffused everything. The officer looks at me and goes, okay. It calms him down. So in a situation where you do a 911 call and they come to your house, something equivalent to that would be good, right?
Exactly. Tell the officer that you have a weapon. Tell him where that weapon's at. Tell him that you're going to reach. Make sure you tell him, or her, you're going to reach for your ID, because he's going to see your ID. Even as a complainant, he's going to see your ID because he has to record everything. He has to write everything down. Just don't make any quick moves. Have your head in the right place at the right time. Tell the officer what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. I'll be honest with you, I got stopped 2 weeks ago. Going down State Highway 36 by a Texas State Trooper. The trooper pulled me over, and my insurance card is in my glove box, along with the weapon I carry. So I told the officer, I said, "Officer, I am going to reach over in my glove box, and I'm a law enforcement officer, retired law enforcement officer. Please don't shoot me because there's a weapon in there." Well, he kind of chuckled for a moment, so I reached in and got my ID, insurance ID, and gave to him. And unfortunately, this particular trooper then gave me a lecture about how he didn't care whether I was an officer or not. And I said, "That's fine, sir. I wasn't trying to get out of anything. And I got a ticket. I got a warning ticket for it. But I said, all I was trying to do was tell you there's a gun there, and I'm going to reach across where that gun's at." And, as a police officer, I appreciated that. Because I don't want to see a gun and some hand going toward a gun.
Yeah. You said that. I'm a left-handed shooter. Packing my heat on my left side. I got my wallet on my left side. Guess what's close to each other?
You reach over to get it.
Officer, I'm using these two little fingers right here. Watch me.
Tell somebody what you're doing. And at nighttime, and folks, and I've talked about this in the past, at nighttime, there's no way under God's green earth that an officer knows whether you're black, brown, purple, or polka dot. If he pulls you over, I don't care what race you are, what color you are, if he pulls you over, put your hands on the steering wheel, turn your interior light on, put your hands on the steering wheel, and tell him what you're going to do when you do it. If he asks for your ID and you have to reach in your wallet, tell him, "I'm reaching for my wallet, sir." You don't want to have a gun screwed to your ear.
It's a lot of it's common sense. It's just common sense isn't too common anymore. Chief, clock's ticking away. We're going to have to end it. I got Master Cindy Keys in the house, so we're going to get her on in just a minute. But Chief, is there any last comment? Basically,
just be careful, everybody, especially during the holiday season. A lot of troopers, a lot of local police are out. And, most of the time, if you're nice to them, they're going to be nice to you.
Sounds good. Guys, let's take a 1 minute break, and when we come back, we'll have Master Cindy Key on doing something physically abusive to me, I'm sure. See the other side. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.